Whether you want to create beats, record bands, a podcast, or do sound and music for your videos, the equipment that you use will vary depending on your needs. For us to identify the equipment that we would need for a production, we first need to understand a few basic principles about how sound works and how it operates with our gear. The properties that we'll discuss in topic 1 for today are wave types, frequency, amplitude, wavelength, phase, and harmonics. After this section, we'll look at software, hardware, and then we'll get to make some recordings. Firstly, let's begin with the types of waves. Have you ever listened to really loud music and felt the vibrations of the sound in your body? Those vibrations in your chest happen because sound is actually very quick changes in air pressure. These very quick changes is what we refer to as a longitudinal wave. For the purpose of sound engineering, we'll be concerned with 2 types of waves: transverse and longitudinal waves. Transverse waves are the waveform I would assume everyone is sort of familiar with. It's the one that looks like the one in this picture and can be seen in nature, such as waves in a pond or a vibrating guitar string. When a guitar string is plucked, the string vibrates in a transverse fashion. You can clearly see it in this video. Now, what is important to realize is that the vibration down the length of the string is creating super tiny differences in air pressure that move away from the string and the guitar. Now, these differences in air pressure moving away from the string is what we call sound. On the other hand, we have longitudinal waves. Sound waves are classified as longitudinal waves, and this is where we'll be spending quite some time today. In actual fact, all sound is purely very quick changes in air pressure, which our ears translate into something we can hear. To illustrate the difference between the 2 types of waves, have a look at the following clip. Longitudinal waves at the bottom are sound waves that push and pull air molecules. This is how our speakers, voices, and instruments produce pressure waves that we can hear. Our microphones then pick up this pressure wave, convert it to electric current, which we then read as a transverse wave at the top. Before we move on, just to recap and make sure that you understand. When a string vibrates, you can see the transverse vibrations along the string. These transverse vibrations push air molecules and cause changes in air pressure that moves away from the string. Those changes in air pressure are called longitudinal waves, and when the air pressure differences reach our ears, we perceive it as sound. Let's have a look at the second part of this section: frequency, amplitude, and wavelength. When an object like a string vibrates, we say that it has a high frequency and a short wavelength. When it vibrates slowly, we say that it has a low frequency and a longer wavelength. Frequency is measured in hertz, where 1 hertz is equal to 1 vibration in a second. The correct term to use for the vibration is actually the word oscillation, and refers to the rate it takes a wave to move from peak to peak, just as this image on the slide indicates. We refer to how high or low a musical note is based on its pitch. The higher the frequency, the higher the pitch. Similarly, the lower the frequency, the lower the pitch. So, if frequency is related to pitch, how do we measure loudness? Okay, so loudness is a topic we will discuss at length in Module 2, but for now, all that you need to know is that amplitude is how we measure how much power a sound has. In our recording software, it looks like this and is measured in decibel. Then we also have phase. Phase refers to the relationship between 2 waves and how much of the frequency, wavelength, and amplitude corresponds. We measure it in degrees, and the reason for this is because we refer to a complete wave as 1 oscillation. Now, 1 oscillation is equal to 1 full circle, and a circle has 360 degrees. When 2 of the same waves crash, the frequency, amplitude, and wavelength will affect what happens to these waves. In this image, the 2 waves are 90 degrees out of phase. Look at the peaks and start points of the waves, and you will notice that there is a 90-degree difference between the 2 peaks. When the 2 sound waves have the same amplitude, frequency, and wavelength, we say that the 2 waves are in phase with each other. The image on the right is an example of 2 waves 90 degrees out of phase again. When two sound waves have the same frequency and amplitude, but are 180 degrees out of phase, such as the third graph on the right, the waves will cancel each other out and you will hear no sound even at full volume. When the two waves are out of phase, we say that a phase shift occurs. A piano and a cello sound very different from one another, and this difference in sound, even if they play the same note, is called timbre. We use the word timbre to describe the tonal qualities of different instruments. So, the question then arises, why do they sound different if they are playing the same note? The answer is due to harmonics, also known as overtones. Okay, so then what are harmonics or overtones? Every sound in the world is made of a combination of frequencies. So, when a guitar and a piano play the same note, A for example, the pitch sounds the same, but the timbre of the instruments sound very different. This is because every tone is made of layers of different frequencies. The frequencies are all based on a ratio. So, no matter what sound you make, these frequencies will always be present. The combination of these waves create what we hear as timbre. The software and hardware that we use to record and reproduce sound has changed dramatically over the past 140 years. Nowadays, you can buy great microphones and plug them into your phone and make great recordings. Steve Lacy famously produced a track for Kendrick Lamar using only GarageBand on his iPhone 6. In this section, we'll go over the basics that you need to know in order to get the right gear for your needs and start making great recordings. The computer software that we use to record and process sound is called a digital audio workstation, or DAW for short. In the starter pack, I've included links to a host of great free DAWs. You will need to download and install one to get the most out of this lesson and course. In the third section of today's lesson, we will look at how DAWs operate, what are the similarities between all of them, and how to make a good sounding recording. Your audio interface is the link between your microphone and your computer. All sound that is captured from the outside world must pass through your audio interface to be recorded on your computer. If you have speakers, you will also connect them to your audio interface. The interface is important for a variety of reasons. Remember in lesson 1, we showed you how microphones generate electric current? Well, the audio interface translates the current from the microphone to the computer. This process is called analog to digital conversion, or ADC. Your audio interface translates the information from your computer to an electrical signal, which we can send to our speakers and listen to what we've just created. This process is called digital to analog conversion, or DAC for short. Some microphones, like condenser microphones, work with 48-volt phantom power. The audio interface provides this to your microphone. There is a Focusrite Scarlett 2i4 audio interface in this image. As you can see, you have the phantom power option for your condenser mics and can also choose between the line or instrument. Line is for when I plug my microphone in, and instrument is for when I plug my electric guitar in. We discussed microphones quite extensively in lesson 1, so here is just a brief recap of what we spoke about. Dynamic microphones are also called moving coil microphones. Condenser microphones require 48-volt phantom power to operate effectively. Ribbon mics are extremely fragile and require a lot of care when handled. For your first microphone, I would advise to invest in a dynamic microphone or a large diaphragm condenser. These microphones are robust, won't break if treated roughly, and they are also easy to use and they really make great recordings. Ribbon microphones are very fragile. Even a puff of air from someone singing can break the microphone diaphragm. On average, the diaphragm of a ribbon microphone is only 5 microns thick. These microphones are most suited for those who are experienced working with very sensitive equipment. The upside though, they do sound great. The speakers and headphones that we use to monitor our recording and mixing are slightly different from the ones we use to listen to music and other media for recreation. The main difference is that studio speakers, which we will refer to as studio monitors from now on, and headphones have a flat response, where speakers such as hi-fi or radio speakers have a shaped response. All that this means is that studio monitors and headphones with a flat response play all frequencies at equal loudness. Recreational speakers often have a shaped response, such as a bass boost function. In this graph, you can see that the red curve has a bass boost and the pink one a bass cut. This is typical of our home speaker systems that compensate for the way we hear sound. The green curve has the flattest response, with minimal deviation from the center line. This is what we want from our studio speakers and headphones. We prefer monitoring sound over speakers with a flat response, because it is easier for our ears to identify sound issues that need to be adjusted. Until now, we discussed the basic equipment and principles that you will need to get your own recording studio up and running. I know this lesson has a lot of new concepts and principles, so please allow me to refresh your memory and quickly recap what we discussed. In lesson 1, we spoke about microphones and how they work, where we also saw that we have some striking similarities between the moving coil microphone and speaker designs. Then we elaborated on that a little further, and we also spoke about how to get sound recorded on your computer with an audio interface. We discussed the physics of sound and saw the difference between transverse and longitudinal waves. We then also looked at how we measure frequency, amplitude, and phase. Lastly, we will discuss working in a DAW and look at which settings you need to look at to run your own smooth, creative recording session. In order to make a video, your camera takes lots of pictures and plays them back quickly to give us the impression of moving pictures. The same way that video works with frames per second, sound recording works with sample rate. The sample rate is how many pictures your computer takes of a sound wave in a second. Humans can hear from 20 to 20,000 Hz. So to be able to record every possible sound wave that we can hear, we need to be able to map 2 points of the highest frequency, the peak and the trough, because you need 2 points to draw a line. Therefore, we have a sample rate of 44,100 samples, because it allows us to record frequencies up to 22,500 Hz. It's half of 44,100. Or 2,500 Hz above 20,000 Hz, which is the highest point we can hear. This ensures that we can record the highest frequency we can hear and saving disk space while we are recording on our computers. Music, you need to record at 44,100 samples per second. In some DAWs, this may be indicated as 44.1 kHz. If you want to sync your sound or music to video, you will need to record your sound at 48,000 samples per second, or 48 kHz. To make sure that your recording experience runs smooth as possible, you need to keep an eye on your buffer size. It might happen sometimes that you record, but you realize there is a big time difference between your microphone and your headphones or speakers. If this happens, try decreasing the buffer size a little. This should help in solving the issue. If you are done recording, or even during your recording, if your computer struggles to play sound back, try increasing the buffer size. This will also, of course, increase latency between your microphone and monitors, but at least you can now start making your sounds. This is a DAW. This one is called Reason. This is one of the DAWs that we will use throughout this course. For today, I just want to show you around a little bit so that we can just kind of get familiar with what's going on. In the next lesson, we'll talk about all the numbers and what everything means. And in lesson 4, we're going to talk about music and how to create chords. So very soon, we'll be doing quite a lot of work in the DAWs. But for today, I just want to show you a brief overview and a small little demonstration that I've set up for you. On the left, you will see that we have 2 audio tracks. One is called Piano Original and the other one is called Piano Inverted. These 2 audio tracks are stereo audio tracks, and we know this because we can see 2 waveforms on each of them. If you look to just above the audio tracks, you will see numbers. These numbers represent bar lines and indicate the length of the audio that's being played. In the bottom, you see the tempo, which is 120 BPM. And to the right of that, we have play, record, and pause buttons. If we scroll all the way to the top, we will see that we have a mixer where we can adjust the volume, some panning parameters, and a master volume. Just by browsing slightly more to the right, we can see that we have our faders, FX, inserts, EQ, dynamic processing, and other inputs. We will get to all of these throughout this course, and by the end of this course you will be very comfortable with using all of them. By selecting the audio track, you can select your inputs. You can either select mono, stereo, or if you have any other devices connected to your computer, you will be able to select them here. For those who enjoy electronic music production, this is where you can add your VSTs and other kind of samples and plugins. Now that we've discussed the basic principles of sound and the hardware and software that we need to get ourselves going, let's take a look at some recording software and let's see how it's constructed. This DAW that you see in front of you is called Reason. This is one of the DAWs that we will use during this course. As you can see, there are two stereo audio tracks. One is the blue one called Piano Original, and the other one below it is called Piano Inverted in yellow. Let's take a closer look at these audio tracks and see the similarities between them. Now that we've zoomed in, we can see that the two tracks are exact duplicates of each other. And this is where I want to bring your attention to, that as you can see, the peaks are exactly the same, and the troughs are also in the same places. Now, if we go over to the mixer section over here, you will see that the volume of the piano inverted track is all the way down. I have done this for a very specific reason, and I want to show you an example about phasing. Let's just listen to the audio track that we have and familiarize ourselves with what we're listening to. Then after that, we will get deeper into the experiment. So as you can see, it's a nice little bouncy piano track. And let's go up to the top section of the mixer, because this is something special that I want to show you. At the top, you can see there is a button that says INV. This stands for Invert Phase On. And what this button does is it turns the polarity of the audio track to exactly opposite of what it is. So if you look at the bottom of these two audio tracks we had a look at earlier, what the invert phase option does when you select it on is it flips the polarity of these two audio tracks. So this is a stereo audio track, and now you can see the peak is up here and the trough here. But because we've selected the invert phase on, when it plays, the peak is down here and the trough goes up here because the phase has been inverted. Because we flipped the polarity of the audio track, I've named the audio track Piano Inverted. What I want to show you now is that when we start playing this audio track, and I bring the volume of our piano inverted track up, what we're actually going to hear is a decrease in volume. And this is because the audio tracks are cancelling each other out. The reason for this is because they are in opposite polarity, and because they are replicas of each other, but just in opposite polarity, they cancel each other out pretty perfectly. Just have a listen to this. And pay attention to the volume. And as you can hear, the music is gone. There's absolutely nothing going on. Until we start changing it again. And the reason for that is very, very simple. These two audio tracks are in opposite polarity and they're perfectly cancelling each other out. And the moment we start changing one of these parameters, some of the other sounds will start coming through. Let's play around with the panning. Let me show you. If we pan it to the left, then only the frequencies on the left get cancelled. So the frequencies on the right, they are able to come through and we can hear them. If I pan this one to the right, then the frequencies on the right get cancelled and we can hear it on the left. Now let's just keep it center. Let's play with the width. Now as you can hear, only the frequencies in the middle get cancelled. And as we move it further out, more of the sound gets cancelled out. I suppose it's purely experimental, but it is something that we look out for. When we get to module 3 and 4, we'll get to this in a bit more depth. Especially when it gets to mastering, these principles become very important. But for now, just enjoy the experiment, and if you want to play around with this session, it is definitely available in the bonus content. As you can see, our music is being played at -20 to -15, but our master fader says there's no signal coming through. This is purely due to phase cancellation. We can change any one of these parameters and will start coming through immediately.